Bonjour, bonjour, mes amis. How delightful it is to see you this evening, in particular, talking about such a favorite subject matter here at the DNA Company and within these webinars. And I'm very fortunate in that I get to talk about this tonight with friends and a cat as well. I have the most illustrious Dr. Laura Varden with us, and I also have our most beloved Justin Harris here with us. How are you guys doing?
Good to be here.
Doing quite well, thank you.
Oh, I love it. And I'm excited to jump into tonight's conversation with you guys because I think you're both so very passionate about this space, both from what can we do about this because it's sincerely impacting people's health, but more separately, how do we quantify, how do we understand exactly what's going on so that we can intelligently impact people's health? Right. So welcome. And with no further ado to the audience, we're talking about all things detox tonight. We're talking about methylation. We're going to talk about glutathionization, glucuronidation. I'm missing one, antiox pathways. There we go. So close. And so we want to talk about all the genes that facilitate cleaning up the body. And so I wonder if we can start our conversation this evening because there's so many things that gunk up our body. And I was going through the proverbial Google News feed and I was saying, what is topical? What is interesting to people? It's gunking up the body. And forever chemicals came up a lot. Have you guys been seeing this in the news as well?
Yeah, well, especially when it comes to like cookware and things, because it's like
Mhm.
it's so funny when we talk so much about food, we talk so much about diet and buying this organic food and going for the best choices, but then if you turn around and you cook it in forever chemicals, you're definitely negating a lot of those expensive benefits that you just paid for.
Yeah, 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 yeah. You're darned if you do and darned if you don't. Yeah. I'm curious. People who are listening, and I'd love to hear if you're hearing about forever chemicals, because I want us, between the three of us, I want us to talk about exactly what they are. Because when I was reading through the articles, I found it very interesting that they kept using this phrase forever chemical without necessarily going into what exactly it was. And it became a little bit mystified, right? It was saying everything and nothing all at once. So why don't we start this conversation with what exactly forever chemical is? Um, I have a definition. It might be a little chemistry heavy. Dr. Varden, did you want to start? Because I think you tend to go chemistry heavy, and then I'll jump in with the happy little analogy there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when we're talking about forever chemicals, these are chemicals that persist in the body. It is
Hmm.
really very difficult for our normal detoxification processes to excrete these chemicals. And that's why they're called forever chemicals, because we have not been able to figure out how to truly clear them. Actually, I became aware of them in grad school.
Hmm.
Actually, at Clarkson University, we've actually received NIH and NSF grants, large grants, a couple of the labs at the university to research exactly that. So you're probably wondering, okay, so, well, what are these chemicals? Oftentimes you will hear them as PFAS, polyfluoral alkyl substances. That means that they have many fluorine molecules. And, it really is very difficult. And that's why so much work is going into figuring out how to break these down. And actually, I watched a wonderful movie, Mark Ruffalo starred,
Mm.
called Dark Waters, which is based on a true story.
Hmm.
And it really was amazing what he went through and finding out all of the numerous products that have these PFAS forever chemicals
Yeah.
in them. I mean, it was, you know,
Yeah, and let's very briefly though, let us jump into that biochemistry there because I think that's important because I think what is a forever chemical to our bodies is also a forever chemical to the planet Earth because these substances are net new to our existence, meaning our bodies, nor has the planet ever encountered them before or dealt with them before. Right. And so what exactly are they? What gets categorized into this happy little umbrella that is Forever Chemical? And so as Dr. Varden said, we're talking about something, a unique bonding of a very long carbon chain, right? Most things in nature, most of your body is based in carbon. So we're talking about a happy little long carbon chain. And attached to that is a fluorine. Okay. And this attachment is a very, very strong, resilient, flexible, dynamic attachment. And why do I say this? This is why it was introduced so much to so many things in the 1940s and to an extent continues to be, because this bonding between the carbon and the fluoride means that whatever substance you're being is created, it's usually a plastic, right? It's going to be really resilient to heat. It's going to be flexible. It's resilient. It's kind of all the things that you want, right? Which is why you see it in the Teflons of the world, right? Because it can withstand that high heat and that scratching, right? It's why you see it in a lot of preserving agents. It's why you see it in a lot of plastics, again, because you want that flexibility and that squishability. Squish is a very technical term you'll see in all the literature, right? So the struggle with this, though, because it's this new, very strong bond that really wasn't introduced to the world, I think, until about the 1940s, our bodies did not evolve with it. So our bodies don't know how to break down this chemical bonding, nor does other animals or the planet, our dirt, our soil, all that fun stuff, know what to do with it either. So that means as these things are being dumped in, they hang out and they stay there and they just effectively accumulate and accumulate because the world and separately our bodies don't know how to break that down yet. And this is where starts all the problems, right? That we're seeing, Dr. Varden and Justin, right? Because we as top of the food chain, right? We eat everything from the plants to the animals. We eat all the air, we consume all the products, we eat off all the Teflons, we take all the takeout in those plastic containers, right? That's how it comes into us. True?
Yeah, I mean, and you find it not just in that, but I mean, it's so ubiquitous. It's in like new carpets, to help keep them cleaner, and on these Scotch guard type furniture, and just so many things. And
Yeah.
that constant exposure,
Yeah.
something that I definitely want to touch on is the way that it disrupts and changes our DNA methylation patterns.
Mhm.
So I didn't know if before I do that, if Justin, you had any comments to throw in.
Wow, it's so interesting, right? Because the body has these pro versus anti-inflammatory mechanisms built right in. Like the body makes toxins like free radicals, but it also has systems in place to deal with that. When we're talking about things like forever chemicals, it represents the introduction of something new that the body now has to handle at a baseline all the time. Like they even say receipts and things, like you overhandle receipts and you're exposing your body to these different chemicals. So the
Mhm.
the bombardment in 2025, I think, has overloaded a lot of these pathways that in our ancestors' day may have been perfectly equipped to deal with what that stress load really looked like. So now, I mean, we have to use the tools that we have available to upregulate those pathways. To Dr. Varden's point, I think that it's actually changing people's methylation patterns, right? Because methylation patterns, it's going to be dependent on what that input looks like from the environment. So if you were to alter your environment and increase the toxin load going into your skin and into your airways, et cetera, of course,
Mhm.
over time, that is going to impact your body's methylation patterns, and we're going to have worse cell expression. Our bodies are more stressed because of that constant input. So, really, we've got to look at your genes and see how efficacious your body's actual detox pathways are in the first place. And then we got to figure out how are we going to reduce the exposure because we live on the earth and that's where it all is.
Yeah, yeah. And so, Dr. Varden, before you jump into that, I just want to make sure that our audience is clear on how we're going to be using the phrase methylation here. So, and I see a question from Madeline in regards to this. So let me just answer first, what is methylation, and then talk about it in the two ways that we're going to refer to it this evening. So methylation, you think about a methyl group, it's a happy little chemical group. It's a carbon with 3 hydrogens. And the body uses this kind of like a sticker, like a tagging system. It takes a methyl group and it sticks it onto something. And then once it's stuck onto something, the body's like, cool, I have to do something with it. So sometimes in the case of neurotransmitters, that could be like your dopamine or your noradrenaline. It's like, cool, I no longer use that. It's kind of like saying you're no longer in use. When it comes to hormones, especially estrogens, it's a similar thing. Is toss a little sticker on an estrogen and the body kind of sees it as no longer active, no longer an actor in the hormone system, right? This is also exceptionally, exceptionally important when it comes to DNA. Little methyl stickers are going to get tossed into DNA, and sometimes that tells DNA, hey, you want to make more or you want to make less of this. So the first definition of methylation that we're working with is just simply that sticker tagging process. What Dr. Varden is now going to talk about is a result of that sticker tagging process, right? So she's going to talk about something epigenetics. This is where we take our DNA and we think about how methylation has put on a whole bunch of stickers. That bunch of stickers is going to create a pattern. And those patterns tend to be very reflective of what's going on in the world. So Dr. Varden right now is going to talk about methylation in terms of sticker patterns. And then a little bit later on, we're going to talk about methylation in terms of how do you clean junk out of your body, because both are really important. And I want to make sure we're being very clear, because sometimes they can become a little bit confusing because we're using the same big word to talk about two very different things. So Dr. Varden, do you want to talk about all that sticker patterns and how forever chemicals influence our sticker patterns?
Yes. So like Dr. Kosterman was saying, when we are talking about DNA methylation, this affects the genetic expression. This affects whether a gene is turned on or turned off, as the case may be. And when we're talking about PFAS exposures, they induce persistent changes, meaning ongoing changes that it's very difficult to reverse, okay? Changes in the DNA methylation patterns, particularly at CPG sites. These are linked to genes that regulate all kinds of things, more very specifically with the PFAS exposure, immune function, cancer risk, metabolic disorders, the genes that regulate those things. But getting back to CPG sites. So CPG sites, this is a site, what we call a dinucleotide. This is two DNA bases. So two of which, cytosine, which is the C, is connected to a guanine, the G. And those are sites that when a methyl group is attached, that sticker, okay, it says either to that gene, it silences it, you're not going to be expressed, or it can make it continue expressing. Most of the time, it silences a gene, okay? And this is really important because when we're talking about genes being quieted, silenced, or expressed, well, we don't want all of our genes to be expressed all the time. And we obviously don't want a lot of them silenced. And those of you who have had the DNA aging test or a biological aging test, okay, as compared to chronological aging, we're looking at the DNA methylation patterns. So that's what we're talking about. But in this case, with the exposure to PFASs, it silences them to where we can't really change them readily. And this is where moving into those issues of hypermethylation, meaning we are it's silencing a lot of the genes. Specifically, for example, genes like the PPAR genes, which is linked to lipid metabolism. And there's research on this being linked to that, where that generally can explain why PFAS has been associated with cardiovascular risks. There also has been research on gestational PFAS exposure, meaning, babies in the womb, the mothers being exposed, it altering the methylation patterns in the newborns that have lasting effects for those little children as they are growing so quickly into adolescence, and can create a lot of issues. And I see Dr. Krista, you are just like ready to jump.
I am, because it's again, I think you talk about the epigenetic changes, which are really important, right? We're seeing that literally DNA from mom and dad, the consequences of their forever chemical burden, their toxin burden, are being passed on genetically to their children. But even separate to that genetic transmission, children being born today have a higher concentration of a lot of these forever chemicals than an adult who has been around for 40 or 50 years. There was a study done, I think it was 7 or 8 years ago, and it looked at children born on a specific day, and it found 40-year-old adult equivalents, and it measured the amount of forever chemicals in their body. That child who had literally just been born, I think they took the blood work within the first 24 hours of that child's life. That child had more forever chemicals in them than that 40-year-old adult. And that was 7 or 8 years ago, right? This hasn't spoken about that accumulation we've had since then. And there's new regulations. Let's make sure we're not creating fanfare. Let's make sure we're being honest. There are regulations that we're starting to see some impact from. Right. When we talk about forever chemicals, we're talking about a really, really big group of chemicals. Kind of think about it like a pizza, right? A pizza, your core ingredients is that you're going to have that crust, you're going to have tomato sauce and cheese. What differentiates different pizzas is going to be the toppings. So kind of think about forever chemicals. They all have that carbon fluorine connection, and the rest, they're all different because they have different toppings. And so some some pizzas, some forever chemicals, they last in your body 30 to 40 years. And then there's other ones that are going to be lasting maybe 10 years. And then there's other ones that we don't actually know when they'll actually leave your body. So remember that when we talk about changing regulations, changing exposure, there's hope insofar as you can get rid of some of them, right? Those that only last a decade, 10 years from now, they will be gone, hopefully. But then there's other ones that you're just not going to. So it's really important to understand that when a child is born with such a high volume of these chemicals, right? Unfortunately, some of them just aren't ever going to go away, right? And so it becomes very important when we talk about that epigenetic patterning, how strong have they been passed along a story of please detox, as well as the story of how much is already sitting in their body and needs to be removed, right? And that's where the passion is, right? Because we're almost setting up new children for a fail in two different ways, right? They're genetically exposed to their parents' burden, and then they're physically exposed to everything in utero, right? Which is just so very tricky. Yeah. So why don't we talk, Dr. Arden, do you have a thought before we maybe talk
Yeah,
about what we can do
actually,
about this?
there is a 2022 paper in Environmental Health Perspectives that gave some, very profound information, that they said that humans are exposed to mixtures of hundreds, if not thousands, of PFAS. And these chemicals, which are present in food packaging, so many everyday consumer products, have been detected in more than 98% of the US population serum level, so in their blood, which just goes to show you how ubiquitous this is. And they said, in addition, an estimated 200 million Americans consume water with PFAS concentrations exceeding the 1 nanogram per liter, which is just one of several health-based limits under regulatory consideration. I mean, this was just a few years ago. And, this is something that has just gotten out of hand, that, we're working into regulation. But it just is so sad that we are having so much more of a burden put on us, because people with MTHFR vulnerability or methylation pathway dysregulation. These people, like you were saying, face a compounded risk with PFAS, further depleting methyl donors, impairing detoxification, increasing homocysteine. It's like, fighting that uphill battle, and now you've just thrown another couple 100 pounds on their back. It's just like, oh my goodness, talk about detox
Yeah.
pathway overload.
Yeah. I see Justin's ready to chime in, and I always look to Justin when I need to find the silver lining. So Justin, I trust you're going to help me with some silver lining here,
Yeah,
but I think it's important we shift to that.
it is because, first of all, I'm a man and I'm one of these people that, like, the longer we talk about the problem, the more anxious I get about going to the solution. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sooner or later, I mean, we've got to get to that point. And I think that
Yeah.
it's worth mentioning here that adversity, it really reveals genius, and prosperity tends to hide it. So we're talking about how we have this uphill battle and we have all of these things that we have to fight. I hope you guys are in for a fight. You know what I mean? Like, it's this is something that we can still conquer. There's more and more
Mhm.
innovation in the realm of air filters and water filters, and we have some capacity to take control over our environment. Not all of it, but some of it, right? Like, they tested the snow on top of Everest, and they found that there was heavy metals in that snow. So there's some of this that we just can't avoid. We're at a point where our earth has a lot more toxins than it used to, but
Mhm.
we have access to webinars like this. We have access to a lot of different technology. Look at that beautiful beast behind me. I get in that thing 4 or 5 times a week, and I'm just getting rid of stuff and replacing the stale fluids with reverse osmosis
Mhm.
water and all this beautiful stuff. So while we've got a fight ahead of us, I just don't want us to become cynical in that we can educate ourselves and we can, in fact, move forward with positive thought, positive action. And I believe we can fix it if we do the right stuff, the right toolkit.
Oh, merci beaucoup, monsieur. All right. So why don't we start shifting the conversation before I do, I want to start talking about different detox pathways so that people can understand their genes. So if you have a DNA 360, please grab it so that we can talk to you about some of your genes within it. But before we do that, and as you're reaching for it, let's pull up, if the powers that be, if you guys can pull up the survey for me, I want to make sure we're speaking to what people want to understand today. So the first question we asked was, do you experience anything on a daily basis that might suggest your body's struggling a little bit to detox? Um, and unfortunately, about 65% of our audience is showing up with brain fog and memory issues. And a very, very close and tied second is going to be either chronic fatigue or sensitivity, an awareness of sensitivity to chemicals, be that smells or cleaning products, etc. So we have an audience that kind of self-identifies as burdened, right? And there's many reasons for some of these issues, but we know that poor detox can be chief amongst them because detox impacts so much within the body. The next question we asked is, which of these signs of poor detoxification do you have? And this will be different in everyone. Everyone kind of has an Achilles that tells them when they're not detoxing properly. Um, the bigger ones that we're seeing are bloating or sluggish digestion, a lot of issues within the GI, which makes sense for some of the things that sneak into our foods that aren't actually food. The next category here, hormonal imbalances. So this can be anything from low libido to a very uncomfortable period. Um, Skin is the next highest one there, which it is the biggest organ in the body, right? Tends to really show the weakness there. And a very happy, strong 6% of our audience says they haven't noticed anything. So congratulations to you. Please tell us your secret sauce and I will steal it. Um, the next question we asked here, because this tends to be something that can clue people into their bodies kind of on the fringe. If you've been drinking alcohol or taking certain recreational substances, do you experience any of the following? Flushing or redness, anxiety or heart racing, nausea. So about a third of audience says yes, whereas the balance of the audience says no issues at all, or maybe they're just not drinkers. I saw a few people in the chat saying, I don't drink, so I can't really answer that one. The next question that I have here is, Have you ever been told or suspect you might have any of the following detox concerns? And we did list them all out. A lot of people come forward with methylation concerns. So we'll make sure we address that this evening with the next one rounding up at glutathionization. And I really value the 30% of the audience is like, I have no idea what those are. Hopefully by the end of tonight's webinar, you'll have a bit of an understanding as to what they are. The last question here is how often do you feel that your body needs to reset or detoxify? Um, and I'm a little bit remiss insofar as I don't think the true answer is here. So maybe this is a bit of a trick question. So a lot of people said weekly, monthly, a few times a year. 15% were honest and said they never thought about it. Dr. Varden, Justin, what's the real answer there?
I think daily. I would say daily. Dr.
I'd say
Varden, what do you?
nightly, but daily, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the meaning. Our bodies are detoxing every moment. I mean,
Mhm.
but it also, you have to consider, are we talking about supporting the regular detoxification pathways, or are we talking about doing a detoxification protocol, a therapeutic way? Because they are different.
Fair
So
enough. Touche.
it's very important to clarify what type of detox we're talking about.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah. And I think Colleen had a similar question of like how often should you be practicing a detox? And so maybe we address that more tucked into the questions and answers because I want to make sure that we start jumping into the genetic awareness we have around some of our detox pathways, some of the pathways that will really support the elimination of these forever chemicals, even if it does take them 30 plus years to get there. Let's talk about all the pathways that manage the things that we are exposed to in this delightful little world. So why don't we've already touched on it, methylation. Um, Lara, Justin, would either of you kind of like to touch again on what methylation is and how that plays very specifically into detox?
How about you do methylation? I'll do glutathinization.
Look at you.
Okay, so when we're talking about methylation, it's really important to know that it is a pathway. It's very complex. There's a lot of genes that are involved in methylation. Now, in our DNA 360 reports, we focus on about 6 of them, actually 7 really. So we have 2 MTHFR genes. And these you'll find in your anti-inflammation reports. And it's actually a sub-report that says methylation. And in that, you will see the genes like MTHFR, SHMT1, MTRR, MTR, FUT2, but another one that's very important is the COMT gene. That's the one who gets to put the sticker wherever its little heart's desires. Obviously it is directed in the particular pathway that, it is directed into. So, with this, I mean, really, when we're talking about methylation, the big supporters of methylation are your B vitamins. We have spoken on this in so many different ways, in so many different webinars, and I do encourage you, to dive into our series of methylation to get more information on that if you have missed it. And I don't want to take the time to go into all of that right now. But methylation is very important. And when we're talking about supporting that normal process, and when I had mentioned earlier about detoxification, and I said it depends because it depends on what you mean. Methylation is a natural, normal process that happens every moment of every day in your body in so many different ways. And we need to support that. And like I said, ways to support that is looking at the particular variants that you have to see how specifically for you can you support that. What type of folate B9 do you need? Can you do a methylated form? Do you need an adenylated form? Your cobalamin, your B12, same question. Can you take a methylated form or do you need an adenylated form? But not only that, it is making sure you're eating the foods that support your methylation pathway and doing the things to help support overall detoxification. And I loved how Dr. Krista said, doing that every night. Part of what she's talking about is getting good quality sleep. That is when your body does the deep work. So it is a full lifestyle, nutrition, mind, body, soul, keeping the stress levels down and exuding the energy of health and healing at every moment. So I will hand it over to Justin to talk about some of the other detox pathways.
Thank you. And you can see why I passed the mic over to Dr. Varden for that, because she had such good explanations of methylation. So, I mean, glutathione, right? Glutathione conjugation pathways would represent yet another way that the body detoxifies itself. And this is really relevant for phase 2 detoxification, right? So detox happens in more than one phase. Glutathione would play its role in taking toxins at various locations in the body, changing them around so that it renders them water soluble. Water soluble matters because that's a big part of how we get rid of toxins, right? Sweating, going to the bathroom. I think that's why the question there was a little bit of a trick question, because every time you go to the bathroom or every time that you sweat, you are detoxifying, right? So we are doing it on a daily or a nightly basis. With regard to the genes associated with glutathione, we look at a few of them. The big brother or sister of that family is what's called GSTT1. That's the one that's associated with liver detox. And your liver matters so much, guys. Like, it's not just a detox organ. It plays a big role in bile flow, right? So people that go on ketogenic diets and they have poor enterohepatic circulation, that means that there's this potential gumming up of your liver to where the liver and the gallbladder are not working in unison to clear things out. So if you have any level of liver toxicity, it can impact your ability to digest nutrients. It can impact your conversion of T3 to T4 for your thyroid and detox. It does a lot of different things. So if you have a suboptimal GSTT1, which we measure as what's called a CNV, a copy number variation. So if you have 0 or 1 out of a possible 2 copies, it represents a reduced capacity at the level of the liver to do its job. So that means that your liver is not going to be able to clear out, let's say, pharmaceutical substrates as well as somebody else might. Or you might be more of a lightweight with alcohol, right? Because it's building up in the bloodstream because your liver is not able to filter it out fast or effectively. So GSTT1 matters. Look in that profile. It's called glutathionization, and see how many copies you have there. If it's any less than 2, we need to be aware of that. And you also might not be able to use a lot of glutathione, believe it or not. There's a paradox that exists with that one, because on paper, and even really intelligent practitioners will say, well, it appears as though you're not detoxing well. Let's just load you up with a bunch of glutathione. But remember that genes operate as instructions. And if we're missing certain instructions, you don't want to add substrates willy-nilly because your body might not be able to use them. So GSTT1 is all about the liver. 2 copies is ideal for that. GSTM1 represents detox at the level of the gut microbiome. Same idea. It's a copy number variation, but we found in our, in our studies and things, when I say our, I mean studies that were done before I got here, is that 1 copy is actually the ideal circumstance, because modern context, we've added, I saw someone mention glyphosate in the comments. There's so many additional toxins in our diet that 2 copies is actually over aggressive. And it can actually lend itself to a wearing away of the gut wall, because it's almost kicking on an immune response over and over again. You can be too good at detoxing, believe it or not, and it can actually cause downstream effects that are not so desirable. So if you have 0 or 2 copies of GSTM1, that's more suboptimal, and we may need to add some gut health strategies in, but 1 copy would be ideal there. Then we have GSTP1, and that's actually measured as a SNP. So it's going to be the little letters instead of the numbers. And that's more to do with the respiratory tract. So I actually almost pair this with the methylation conversation because we know what pollution does to the methylation cycle. It impacts it. It makes it not function as well. So if you've got great methylation, let's say at a baseline, but you have suboptimal GSTP1, and maybe you live in an area where there's smog and things, this could actually impact your methylation in a suboptimal manner. So we may need to once again add in high quality air filters, and you can nebulize glutathione and exosomes and all kinds of stuff to help clear that out. But just know that that's to do with the respiratory tract, and you need a line of defense there because we take 20,000 breaths every day. And if there's a little trickle of toxins in each one, you're adding to the totality of your toxin load by quite a ways. There's also one called GPX, glutathione peroxidase, and that's actually the second phase of the antioxidative pathway. So this is where I toss the microphone to Dr. Kosterman to talk about the SOD2 antioxidative pathway.
Yeah. So it's a happy little transition because I think this fits really well together with glutathione, in particular your comment that sometimes people can be overdoing it, and this will have impact within SOD. So I'll come back to that, but let's start first with what SOD and GPX are and how they interact. So we've had a lot of conversations in these webinars about our mitochondria, right? Everyone in this audience, I imagine, is a sleeper cell where if I say, what does the mitochondria do? Everyone will jump up and be like, it's the powerhouse of the cell. And that's true. The mitochondria does power the cell. It converts your sugar, well, it helps convert your sugars, your glucoses into energy. Additional to that, it does a lot of direction of the immune system. It does direction between different cells. They kind of talk. I think about the mitochondria kind of like a kitchen table, right? You get your food at the kitchen table, but you also talk to people at the kitchen table. And so there's a lot of information exchange. So keeping your mitochondria clean is incredibly important, just like keeping your kitchen table clean is important. If you have a dirty table, no one is going to come and eat at it. That means you're not getting energy, and it means the body and the cells aren't talking to one another, right? So SOD2 and GPX are 2 genes that help keep our kitchen table really, really clean. And I've seen a few questions in the chat around where do we find all these genes? Okay, all of these are going to be within a report called inflammation. And within that report, there's going to be sub-reports. One will be glutathione, which is what Justin spoke about. One is going to be methylation, which is what Dr. Varden has spoken about. One will be antiox, which is all of this. And then we're going to have brownie points. We're going to quickly talk about glucuronidation, if I can say it properly. And we'll talk about where that is because that's not within the inflammation report. But if you're looking at your antiox report, right, you'll see your SOD, you'll see your GPX. And I think this is where I'd ask the powers that be to toss in a link to the webinar where we had a conversation around mitochondria and the most optimal presentation there. And it's a bit nuanced, but essentially what you're looking for is balance between these 2 genes. If one gene is fast, you want the other to be fast. If one gene is slow, you want the other to be approximately slow. Okay, ideally you have a moderate to a quicker speed and they're very well balanced. And what this is saying is that the people that are cleaning that kitchen table, they're doing it at an equal rate so that things are flowing properly. There's not a backlog or a front log of anything there. Okay, and so the genes are really, really important, keeping the mitochondria clean, keeping that table clean. Okay, and that connection that Justin was alluding to before, right? So some people who don't attach their glutathione well, who don't have great glutathione copy numbers, they'll still get injected with glutathione. And so the body's dumped with all this glutathione, which is a very strong antioxidant. Okay. And what happens is if you can't attach it, right? If you get this huge dumping and you don't have the genes and the enzymes to attach it to something, right? That glutathione is like, cool, I have nothing to do. No one's claiming me and putting me onto a toxin. So I'm going to go around the body and find where can I make some trouble. And glutathione naturally wants to attach to things that have a positive or a negative charge. what part of the body is most charged is going to be some of the activity within that mitochondrial cell. And so if you do too much glutathione, right, if you think you're doing well by your body consuming a lot, having it injected, but you don't have the genes to support it, this actually can go in and mess up your mitochondria. I clearly have some mitochondria here, I guess, because that's what I was grabbing for, but it goes in and it messes it up. So what Justin was saying there around being mindful, knowing your genes and knowing your capacity is really, really, really important. I think we've each of us, Lara, Justin, and I, we've all seen people who have come in and said, I did a glutathione IV and I felt horrible afterwards. And oftentimes they tend to be people with that poor genetic presentation where their glutathione went rogue and then attacked the mitochondria. Not literally, but kind of like that, a little bit stronger. Yeah. Anything to add to that before we quickly jump on to glucuronidation, guys?
Yeah, one thing quickly is that one of the funnier things that I've encountered is people that don't have access to the genes is when they do get loaded up with glutathione and they have that reaction to it, their practitioner tells them, well, that's just a byproduct of the detox process,
Mm,
right? And it's like it's unfortunate, but that's why we're doing what we're doing, because we're trying to incorporate the genomic information, because even a well-informed practitioner would say that, because yeah,
mhm.
sometimes there are, symptoms of the detox process itself, and you can
Yeah.
get detox reactions, but that's not what's going on there. So it's a tremendous misnomer. It's that your body is missing the instruction manual for what to do with that antioxidant.
Yeah, yeah, a very wonderful mentor of mine and someone that used to work very closely with the DNA company, Dr. Winnie Sue, talked a lot about when you're detoxing, there should not be pain, and if there is, you're pushing the body too hard, and you need to reconsider that plan. So fatigue is one thing, right? Sometimes people get these injections and they'll feel tired, and that's to an element of body wants to slow down so it can do the detox work. A little bit of momentary fatigue is one thing, but full out pain, full out worsening is a very different thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts, Dr. Varden, before I happily jump into glucuronidation? Because I can say it
Oh,
all
I
well.
am just absolutely loving the metaphors, the analogies, the wisdom. It's just beautiful to be a part of.
Oh, girl, you're part of this too. We all weave our stories together. They are collective stories. Yeah. All right, I'm going to quickly jump into glucuronidation, and then I think maybe we start into our Q&A because I can see them piling up. I can see this. How do I help? How do I clean up? How do I? So glucuronidation is something that you will actually find in your hormone and fitness reports. If you want to go into your system summary, you're looking for two different gene presentations there. The first one is going to be UGT2B17. That's 1 7. The other one is going to be UGT2B15 or 1 5. Okay. And taken together, these guys will look at how well can you support your glucuronidation. So glucuronidation, what is this? As Justin talked about with glutathionization, as Lars talked about with methylation, a lot of these are second phase detox reaction actors. Okay, so when we talk about detox, we're really talking about 3 different stages. 2 stages will happen in your liver. The third stage is either going to happen at your skin, your kidney, or your bowels. Okay, so the first 2 stages, your body's going to your liver's going to find the toxin and it's going to mark it. It's going to say, I got to get rid of this. The second stage, you actually do that process of packaging it up, making it water or fat soluble so you can get rid of it. And then the third stage is any 3-year-old would love to tell you, you're going to poop, you're going to pee, or you're going to sweat. That's how you actually get rid of it. That's the third stage. So part of the second stage, this is where methylation, glutathionization, glucuronidation, when I can say it, happens. Okay. And it's really just packaging up the toxin, the forever chemical, the hormone, the xenobiotic, whatever it might be, packaging it in a way that you can either pee, poop, or sweat it out. Okay. So this is another system. When you're looking at this, UGT2B15, I believe, has a copy number variation. Okay. And you're looking for ideally a higher copy number variation. Okay. And then UGT2B17, I believe, and Dr.
It's
Varden, oh,
it's
have I mixed
actually
them up?
UGT2B17 is the copy number variant. That
Thank
will have a
you.
number in, and the other one, the one ending in B15, B15, that is a SNP.
You're the best. Now, can you remind me, what is the favorable presentation of 15? Because I know it's G or T, and I forget which one
There
people
is
want.
a T that's faster, a G is slower.
Thank you. So ideally, you're looking for those T's, T's across the board. Thank you, Dr. Varden. I walked into that and I was like, oh, I'm not going to remember this. So those you will find in your hormone report. And as with anything, there's a balance, right? We keep them in the hormone report because they're really influential of androgens or testosterones. So there's an element of fast isn't necessarily better, but this is really where you come in and work with a practitioner to understand how specifically this is all nuanced within the body. Okay. So I think we've coursed through our 4 detox mechanisms that we have exceptional genomic insight into. Guys, any other comments before we jump into the Q&A? Any little pearls of wisdom, anything that we missed before we jump into Q&A?
Go
Well,
ahead.
I wanted to tie some of that into what we spent a lot of time talking about with PFAS,
Mm,
um, because you were mentioning about the different detoxification phases.
mm-hmm,
Phase one, having this has to do with the CYP genes, which is the cytochrome P450 genes. That's your phase one, generates reactive intermediates. It is the shifting of toxins from fat soluble to water soluble, like Justin was talking about, so that way we can then excrete it. Well, PFAS overwhelms the system. It increases the reactive intermediates. It
mm-hmm,
increases that oxidative stress. And then jumping into the phase two, the conjugation pathways, methylation, glucuronidation, glutathione conjugation, those are all phase two. That takes it that step further of taking that mostly, or partially soluble toxin and making it fully water soluble. PFAS actually binds to glutathione. It reduces its ability for that toxin neutralization. And glutathione is our master antioxidant of the body. And we don't want that to lose its efficacy. In methylation, it actually creates a bottleneck. High PFAS burden, it exhausts the methyl donors like SAMe. It impairs hormone metabolization, DNA repair.
mm-hmm.
So all the more it is important to take the steps that we're going to be talking about, and I definitely want to mention these if they didn't get asked in the questions. I don't want to leave people hanging because there are some things that can be done. And there's more research out there, but there's actually some literature that has shown that we can lower the serum levels. And
Mm-hmm.
there's even gut bacteria that help to bind it that I want to mention
Mm-hmm.
too. So I wanted to be able to connect the main substance we were talking about with the detoxification pathways that we are rounding out before we go into
Storyteller.
questions.
I love that's beautiful. You made the story. I love it. Beginning and end. I love it. Thank you. All right. Mr. Justin, anything from you before we jump into the Q&A?
Not really. I just think that we need to always bear in mind that the body's going to do certain things well, and the body's going to have certain areas that
Mm,
need to be reinforced. It's a nature versus nurture thing as well. We know that we've added in certain elements. That means that we need to upregulate certain pathways. But know your genes, and then really just try
mhm,
to zoom out a little bit and understand these little environmental changes that you can make. It
mhm,
might be an intermittent fasting strategy here and turning off your Wi-Fi router for a few hours there. All these little decisions, these micro decisions, can lead to your body having less of an uphill battle and less to fight. So try not to stress about it either, because it is stressful. The more you think about it, the more stressed you're going to get. And I would rather get into some action here than, sit around and be worried about all these different areas that our body is being flooded with toxins, because that compounds the effects. You know what I mean? So try to keep a positive mindset here and try to make sure that you're supporting your body in all the ways that you can.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's an element too of you have to decide what's important to you, what you're willing to do and not willing to do, right? I'm pretty crunchy and yet my nails are always did, right? It's you have to pick where your joy points are because there's no way you can eliminate it all. And so you have to do that 80% and then really roll in the dirt and have fun in that 20%.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I love that though. I love that. I love between the both of you, there's always a really firm reminder of calm the body down, calm your nervous system down, because getting in a tizzy around something that you can't necessarily control is just going to make what you can't control worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All
Stress is
right. Let's jump in here. So Colleen asked our first question. This kind of goes back a little bit to the survey, and to an extent, it depends on your definition of detox. So if we were to take kind of Dr. Lard's biochemical definition, we're always detoxing. But why don't we talk around some of the detox protocols? The question is, how often should you practice this? Now, Colleen, I'm going to disclaim this a little bit. This is something really you do need to talk to your practitioner about because everyone's health status, everyone's age, all the other fun stuff like this really, really, really going to change the answer to this. But in general, guys, what are your thoughts? How often do you think we should be doing some sort of detox? Yeah, and Terry's asking for a definition of detox. So why don't we offer that more, not necessarily that biochemical definition, but more that practice intervention definition?
Oh, there's so many ways to answer that particular part of it, right?
You're
Because it's
welcome.
like I think that what I mentioned in the earlier part of the call, as far as the body's striving for homeostasis, we have pro and anti-inflammatory action going on in the body all the time, and the body has these built-in mechanisms, right? The body has an innate intelligence to regulate these things. However, the body was designed a long time ago, and now 2025, we've introduced a number of elements. So my definition, I suppose, of detox would be the restoration of homeostasis in the body by counteracting some of the elements that we've added in. You know, and that we need to do it with some level of specificity because once again, a green juice detox might work tremendously for one person and it might just cause GI upset for another. So I think it's about restoring the actual homeostatic control of the body because we've introduced too many toxic elements. Dr. Laura, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to detox, I work with so many different people and I do detoxification protocols that it really comes down to what is the need of the person sitting in front of me. It can be very personalized in, do they happen to have a heavy metal burden? Do they happen to have a mold toxicity burden? Are they do they have glyphosate or some sort of environmental toxin burden? Because that will dictate how I move forward, what I do, not only in a lifestyle sense, but maybe types of foods that they eat or types of supplements I will have them take or not take, as the case may be. But in all, there are certain things that absolutely must be done before you do any type of therapeutic detoxification protocol. Number one, that you are pooping regularly. You've got to be able to excrete the toxins that you are binding and moving through the body. You don't want to be reabsorbing them. So that is paramount. And we are talking, what is pooping regularly mean? What does that look like? That is at least once to twice per day. If that's not happening, that needs to be facilitated before a detox protocol takes place. The next thing is the lymphatics, making sure that the lymphatics are flowing and draining. Because again, if they are sluggish, if they're stagnant, well, removing the toxins from the cells, from the tissues, if they're getting stuck in sluggish, thick lymph, they're just going to get reabsorbed. They're not going anywhere. They're not getting to the liver to be processed. They're not getting to, the kidneys and into the intestines to be pooped and peed out or sweat out. So we need to make sure that's draining and flowing. And then you need to make sure, well, hydration, but that you have the correct herbs, supplements, things to help chelate and pull out, and process whatever happens to be on board that we're trying to get rid of. There are some general things that can be done. Fasting protocols can be very helpful. Food elimination, like what Justin had mentioned, the celery juice. Yeah, that can be good, but not for everyone. And this is where working with a qualified professional who knows what they're doing, who knows your history, symptoms, and detoxification protocols, that's really important. Otherwise, you could get yourself into trouble and have like Herxheimer reactions that you guys were mentioning earlier, in the fact of feeling like crap, having the pain, having these heavy flu-like symptoms. That shouldn't happen if the detox is done correctly.
Love it. Thank you, Dr. Ryan. All right. Echo is asking our next question, and her question is, have you ever encountered a person with an absence of methylation SNPs? I'll grab this one. So everyone has methylation SNPs, right? If you fully have that gene deletion, you're probably not making it out of mama's tummy, right? Because you do need methylation for so many different things. Now, what I imagine you're asking here is, have you ever encountered someone with a lot of suboptimal SNPs, meaning you're really struggling to move your methylation processes along well? And the answer is yes, all the time. From a statistics perspective, I see it quite often in Mediterranean populations. But now that there's so much globalization and mixing within the world, that's not as firm and fast as before. And I will just offer that clinically, each of us have seen people with poor combinations of methylation SNPs, and they're still kicking along well. Do they need additional support? Absolutely. Are they more sensitive to their environment and to their world? Yes, right. So it's kind of one of those, oh, Mondia, girl, you got to move. It's one of those ideas that if you know your SNPs of methylation, you are now empowered with that information of how you can better navigate the world. In particular, what protocols do you need to put in place when you're exposed to illness, when you're exposed to a lot of toxins, when you're exposed to that, right? Knowing that sort of stuff really educates how can you respond when those systems are going to be taxed, right? I hope that's helpful. Guys, anything to add before we jump into the next question?
Nah, you nailed that.
Holla. All right, next question. Oh, I love this question. Thank you, Joseph. So what objective evidence do you have that confirms that detoxification is working? Oh, Monzia. Okay, there's several questions here. So I'm going to break it down a little bit. So first question, how do we know if detoxification is working? I'm going to kind of toss in the same answer that we had before, insofar as if your detox wasn't working, you wouldn't be here. It's a question of the quality of it. So I see I love Dr. Barton nodding here. Yeah. So, how do we know that DNA is being methylated? I'm going to toss this one to maybe Dr. Varden if you want to talk about our DNA-aging testing, and because I think he's kind of more talking about that pattern, those stickers that go on top of DNA. Do you want to talk to that one, and then I'll break down some of his questions next after that.
Sure. And yeah, and I had mentioned this earlier about our DNA aging. It specifically looks at the DNA methylation patterns across our genetics, across our genome. And I mean, it's in research, there are specific sites that have been discovered, quantified, as far as looking against a library, going, okay, so these genes are related to this particular function, whether it be like immune function. Okay, so we're talking about neutrophils, lymphocytes, because this is actually a really good correlation. Now, in blood work, yes, neutrophils and lymphocytes are looked at, for inflammation and noticing whether you're fighting off a bacterial infection, viral infection, XYZ. But when we're talking about DNA methylation patterns, it's not a matter of looking at the white blood cell count of those types of white blood cells. It's actually looking at the DNA inside these cells and saying, hey, what does the methylation pattern look like? And how is this compared to a library of others that are healthy, that are not so healthy, that have particular disease states or health states? And where does this line up? So it's very objective because it's a quantification, a pattern recognition of these methyl groups on the DNA. So that very specifically looks at that. Did you want to speak a bit into methylation and hormone metabolism, maybe specifically into the 2-hydroxyestrone and the methylation pattern that we can see in our Dutch test? Well, I mean, not the DNA companies, but in
Right. Moi? C'est moi?
yeah, did
Yeah,
you
yeah,
want to
yeah,
continue?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I guess so Dr. Varden has just really spoken to at that genetic level, right? That pattern level where we can see evidence of how life is being lived and how that's impacting genes that are being expressed, right? The next thing, and this is a little more tangible, there's something called a Dutch test. It's a urine test and it looks at different metabolites. So remember when we were talking about all this detox, we talked about you're either going to poop, pee, or sweat it out. This will analyze urine and it looks at different metabolites. So effectively, the little break as something is being broken down, you'll get a little piece of it. It analyzes those little pieces, and you're able to see, how much of something are you breaking down? Do you have a big burden of this, that, or the third? So that sort of testing is able to help quantify what sort of hormones are going through body. It's also able to look at methylation. So not methylation as Dr. Varden talked about it, but methylation just now, but more methylation in that sense of, are you able to methylate, add that sticker to something, which we know is so important. So it's able to help gauge that. So that, Joseph, there are several ways that we're able to quantify a lot of this. But to your point, some of it, he did ask the question of, is this all subjective? Some of it is subjective, right? Insofar as different people are going to have different sensitivity thresholds to different processes. Sometimes you'll get these results back, right? And one person, their DNA aging, for example, they'll have the exact same results, and one person will be like, oh, I knew it. I've been feeling this way. I don't feel great. Whereas another person may not, right? There's an element of absolute subjectivity there because different people are going to have different sensitivities. But this is something that has been validated in research and continues to be validated. I would offer in 5 years from now, right now, we'll be looking back and being like, we knew nothing. You were just scratching the surface, but we're still scratching the surface right now. We have evidence that scratches the surface. And in 5 years from now, when we have bigger computers and more pattern recognition, we'll probably know even more. So we're kind of on that beautiful cutting edge of science that we're able to say, we can see how methylation patterns impact and how environment, how diet, how lifestyle shifts these patterns and can change them. So I hope that was helpful, Joseph. All right. Echo has another question. Um, and I think this goes back to my little rant before around babies being born with forever chemicals. Do babies have more forever chemicals in them because they're being born to young mums who have more exposure to these chemicals, and the fact that this fetus acts as a storage depot? I want to qualify. I'm not an expert on the biochemistry of all this bioaccumulation, but I would offer it's probably both, insofar as mom has more exposure, therefore that is going to be fed to baby. But separate to that, because they're still being grown, they haven't developed organs and kidneys and things to filter. And so they're all the more sensitive. They all the more bioaccumulate. They're building themselves with this as part of the building block. So I'd say yes to both. Okay. All right. I hope that's helpful.
Can I address just a couple? There's
Please.
in the chat, there's like a few things directed right at me. So if I could quickly pull
Please.
that off
Yes.
here.
Thank you.
First one was just a comment from Shaman. I hope that I'm saying that right. Justin, you really helped me figure something out with the dopamine content. For those of you who don't know, there was a dopamine podcast we did last week. So thank you. And I'm glad that you got some value out of that. Um, I think Amber was asking me what my Instagram is. It's Justin Harris Official because I have no creativity. And then
No,
the
that's
last
just
one,
fancy. You're
yeah,
official
that
there.
way, that way
No,
people
you're
know.
just fancy.
And then the last one was asking if I'm located in the GTA. Does that mean Grand Theft Auto? I'm not sure what that is.
Oh, come on. Okay, okay, so you're Canadian. You know GTA because it's the center of the world.
Oh,
Greater Toronto area. I'm
oh no,
teasing
I'm
him.
not. Okay, no,
I'm
no.
teasing him. And Canadians, you're allowed to beat up. Toronto people come to my defense. Everyone else, you're allowed to beat me up for that comment.
British Columbia, so I'm on the other side. That's it.
Yeah,
I think that was the ones.
yeah, awesome. No, thank you for keeping up with the chat. I appreciate that. Um, okay. All right. So Janice is asking a question here about what is the end result of these forever chemicals? We know about cancer, true, especially kidney cancer, because we tend to eliminate a lot of them through kidneys. But what is the other impact, and can knowing your DNA tackle any of these shortcomings? Yes. How, Dr. Varden, Justin, would either of you like to dive into this question?
Yeah, I think that, well, first of all, when we're bouncing it off of the genes, we need to understand that if we have an already suboptimal detoxification process, that's going to amplify the effect, right? So we know that these forever chemicals can, interrupt your immune function. Well, we have a lot of genes that are associated with that. It can
Mhm.
cause elevated liver enzymes. Well, I mentioned the GSTT one. If that's already suboptimal, well, now we're doubling up on the problem. And you may want to really start to monitor your liver function. Endocrine disruption, right? That's another thing that can happen there. And we do have a hormonal pathway, but it's more so the steroidogenesis pathway. But I mean, they can compromise thyroid, right? And we know that, for example, your gut and your liver both play a pretty big role in thyroid function. So I think as far as the end result, it's really a combination of if you have suboptimal genes as well as exposure to these forever chemicals, it's going to enhance the likelihood of immune system issues, detox issues, potentially the big C. It's going to amplify that effect, right? So it makes it that much more important that we double down on the things that really support those pathways. Dr. Varden, anything to add to that?
I think you handled that quite well and covered quite a bit. And actually, I looked at the timestamp of when she wrote that, and I had dove
Mhm.
into a little bit more about PAFS and the relationship with the detox pathways after she had submitted. And I know we have a lot more questions, so I want to be able to
Ma'am. Yes,
those.
ma'am. All right. The next here is, oh, and I love this question because I think it really speaks to how important it is to know your methylation genes before you take any supplements. So Madeline is asking, what if you cannot tolerate all B as in Bob, vitamins? What happens if they cause anxiety and breathing issues? What can you do instead of B vitamins? So again, disclaimer, Madeline, we don't know your health status, and for us to like truly help you, we'd have to speak with you one-on-one to understand. I can think of potentially two different reasons. Would someone like to tackle the form of B vitamins, and does someone want to tackle the volume of B vitamins?
Well, first, I want to say and clarify when you say I cannot tolerate all B vitamins, well, B vitamins are found naturally in food. Can you eat dark leafy greens? Can you tolerate meats and other proteins that are rich in B vitamins? If you can, lean in on your food. Food first, then look into supplements. And what I'll do, let me hand this over to talk about the different types of B vitamins or where you wanted to move forward on this. Krista, Justin, did you want to take that or?
I have a comment as far as just how common that is with people. So there's hypo and hyper methylators, right? And we see that as a general thing, we see more symptomology of hypermethylating in people that tend to get anxiety when they take B vitamins. So if you look at your genomic pathway and you're already really quick with all of your methylation processes, and then you take like a B complex, right, where you don't even know what's methylated and what's not. It's just a complex, and it's usually pretty high dosed. I've actually seen that really commonly. Actually, I mentioned on one of these webinars that my sister actually one time she was taking B complexes because she thought it would help her with anxiety, and she ended up in the hospital from a panic attack. So,
Oh, oh dear.
yeah, so it's very common. I mean, she's okay now. Obviously, I'm her brother. I'm not just going to let her, not be healthy. But yeah, so if you're a hypermethylator and you take a dose of B vitamins, typically that's actually a pretty common thing. And that's where we need to know the type, the amount. And, to Dr. Laura's point, sometimes it's a good idea to not do synthetic forms and a volume of them, but to maybe just add in a little bit of organ meats or some leafy greens or whatever to start there, some yeast or something like that. But I'm just saying that's actually pretty common in hypermethylators that B vitamins have that effect of anxiety and things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I like that. I think looking at your Comte Madeline will also be really helpful. And then some of the forms of the B. Hold me honest, niacin is B3 or B2? I always forget.
B3.
B3,
Right.
thank you. And so there's a form, if you're taking pure niacin, you're taking a lot, that can actually create anxiety and a flushing reaction in some people. So also looking at the form of the B vitamin that you're taking is going to be really important. There's so many different variables, there's so many different genes. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you're looking for a bit more specific help here.
Yeah. B2 is wonderful. Riboflavin
Thank you.
actually can be very helpful, in that, folate into the methylation pathway.
Mhm.
So there's actually been a lot of research on that.
Yeah. All right. Um, So Joseph has asked another beautiful, wonderful question, and I wonder if we can record that and maybe kick it into a DNAU sort of conversation because I think it exceeds some of the what we're chatting about here. He's asking about non-coding genes and their effect on the expression of genes and mitochondrial DNA. Joseph, these are wonderful questions, and we've done a few webinars on them. So we'll make sure that we get back to you with some of the resources there. Okay, because I don't want to ignore them, but I want to make sure that we only have about 15 minutes, so I want to make sure we get through a few other questions there too. Kathy is asking a question. So, Dr. Varden or Justin, I wonder if you can help her out with this. What is the optimal or suboptimal presentation of GSTP, P as in Peter 1, and then also of SOD and GPX? So Kathy, for Sun GPX, we're actually going to defer you to a webinar that we did because we are really looking for some balance there, and it's a bit more of a complicated answer. So see a previous webinar of ours. But for GSTP1, guys, what are your favorite presentations there?
Well, A is typically found to be the more optimal allele, and G to be the suboptimal allele.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
AG would
Yeah.
also be considered on the suboptimal end. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a very interesting quirk for people who for the nerds out there that are interested. Typically, when you see AA or GG, you're talking about extremes, and the hetero would fall in between. Interestingly, in this instance, the hetero of GSTP1, that's the AG, is worse than the homozygous suboptimal. So, just a little interesting quirk. You're looking for an AA, and there's unfortunately not much grace room with the hetero or the homo suboptimal. Yeah. All right. Justin or Laura, question for you from Marianne. Does red light therapy have a role in detox slash methylation? I see a resounding nod.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it does. And there's a bit of a paradox that exists with it that's worth mentioning because red light therapy, first of all, I'm a big fan of it. I use it on a day-to-day basis, especially in the winter, where I live. It's great to be able to turn the sun on with a button. And it's going to increase mitochondrial efficacy. It's very good for the mitochondria. Um, What I would say is that it does represent a hormetic stress, however, right? Just like the sunshine itself is a hormetic stress, and the appropriate dose is great, but too much of it might actually start to create oxidants in the body. So it's a balancing act, just like any other form of hormesis. And we want to make sure that with red light therapy, we're not doing it for really long periods of time, because you are going to start to create reactive oxygen species in the body, but the right dose of it is going to be anti-inflammatory. I mean, it's going to be a really valuable thing to utilize, but too much of a good thing is in fact just another stress. Dr. Laura, I know you love some red light therapy.
Oh, I do. And again, using it strategically definitely helps. I mean, in so many ways. Even if you have something, very specific. My daughter-in-law actually used it when she had mastitis. I have a unit, and I had her use that 3-4 times a day for about 20 minutes, and it really helped, to clear that and to heal the incision, the drainage incision. I had my husband use it when he broke his shoulder. So many different things. But then you can also do the full panel to kind of help with the full body. Again, understanding its uses, its limitations, and using it strategically is the best way to go.
Wonderful. Thanks, guys. We have another question from Madeline. I recently had a mycotoxin test. I have certain mold mycotoxins and was told to take glutathione supplements because it increases certain mold, or not to take glutathione supplements because it increases certain mold mycotoxins, worsens the condition. I'm not entirely sure what the question is there. Madeline, I would offer, if you want to reach out to us and talk to us about what your genes speak to in your mold profile and your susceptibility and potentially how you might want to leverage them in supporting you, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can reach out to us at CEO@thednacompany.com, because I think depends on what showed up on your test, depends on what other agents are being recommended. There's so many variables there that I'm not sure we could offer you a really good answer. And I think I saw another question from someone asking like, hey, should I be doing IV or pills, or like, how do I do my glutathione? And again, it's not to ignore people's questions. It's just so based in genes here. But roughly the answer is, if you have poor GST copy numbers and you have a poor GST1, you probably don't want to be doing IV. That's the by and large of it. But a clinician can always come in and override us because, again, they'll know your personal history. And there's people with poor glutathione genes, but occasionally can do IV. It's nuanced. That's something you have to be talking to your doctor about because it depends on what's going on in your health picture there. So Madeline, if you want to reach out to us, please do. Okay. Another glutathione question. All right, last one. If I have a variant for glutathione gene, should I never take glutathione, or is it just the amount that needs to be changed? So Justin, Laura, if you have someone that comes in and they have poor GST family genes, meaning probably a few zeros, maybe an AG, something along that space, in general, obviously it's very person to person. Do you ever recommend glutathione? If so, like in what dosing? Large, high? What does that look like for you guys?
Go
A
ahead.
lot of times I always ask about if they've had any experience with glutathione before,
Mm,
supplement, whether being IV, and what happened, what kind of reactions they have, not necessarily going, oh, that was a reaction to that, just saying, hey, how were you? Like, for example, I had a client who had explant surgery, had, the breast implants removed. And during that, they gave her glutathione IV. And she just just felt so sick. And of course, they thought it was just because of that detoxification. That ended up happening twice, and she had the same type of reaction, but never pieced the two together. So when she was telling me this, and I had looked at her genes, she had 0 copies of GSTT1, GSTM1, and granted, she did have an optimal GSTP1, but I'm like, well, That's why, and it most likely was linked to the fact that your body didn't know what to do with it. So asking the questions can be very, very helpful on where they fall on that. But generally, if they're kind of, that in between, say they have one copy of GSTM1, say they have one or no copies of GSTT1 or somewhere in there, and they've taken it before and they never really noticed anything, maybe they can handle it. I always prefer to support with the precursors, because if their body knows what to do with it, well, obviously that's better.
Yeah.
But if they really do want to try that, I always start low, go slow, and really pay attention that that is the only thing we are working on. So we're not bringing in any other confounding factors. So we can kind of test and see. And as long as they don't mind being their own guinea pigs and testing it out, well, then, we can do that, under that, tight oversight. So that's generally how I would handle it.
Beautiful.
Justin, anything? Any other thing?
Oh, I'll just say, quickly here that there is other ways to upregulate those pathways. Like, for example, cold exposure can actually improve the glutathione pathway. You could take a small dose of glutathione with a little bit larger doses of some of the precursors, right, like N-acetylcysteine. There's ways to do it, but I don't know that you really have to risk it. If you actually give your body more of the building blocks, get some good selenium heavy foods, right, you can actually improve the pathway without having to dose yourself up. And remember, it's not all about supplements, right? We have many, many methods of detox. So give each one its cadence.
Yeah. It's tricky when people come in with an idea of, I must do this in order to do that, when there's so many different pathways to healing. And so I hope through this webinar, through our conversation of all the beautiful that genetics can teach you about your detox pathways and why we need to care about them, because we're living in this happy little bath of chemicals. I hope that this evening it was helpful to you, that you know your detox pathways better, you know how your genes support that, and that you leave with better empowerment for your health. We show up for you guys. And so if you're new to this, please, you'll get a survey after this, fill it out so we know how we can show up better for you. Let us know what you want to see more of, what you want to see less of, and how we can better serve you. Because that is what gets the three of us here every, or most evenings, not every night, but most evenings. Yeah. Girl needs a break.
I want to throw in there real quick, because I didn't want to leave people hanging about the PFAS ways to actually where they have found a real reduction in serum levels. So if you do blood plasma donation, scientific research has actually shown that it reduces serum PFAS levels by 10 to 30% over 6 to 12 weeks. I mean, hey, if it's in the blood, well, then just like get some of that blood out.
It's like, do you have hemochromatosis? Just go get blood. Sorry.
And there's actually what we call EBU. Now, granted, there isn't a lot of research specifically on PFAS and EBU. What's EBU? Extracorporeal blood oxygenation and ozonation. It's a therapy, where they like remove the blood, clean it, filter, ozonate it, and then put it back in the body. And, there is, some evidence that it can have the ability to eliminate those, PFAS. But the other thing that I had given you a little sneak peek for when we're talking about gut microbiome, there was a study that was looking at, it's a 2016 study by Jing et al. They conducted an in vitro study aiming at deciphering the potential of lactobacillus strains to bind PFAS. And they actually found that Lactobacillus plantarum was singled out to be having the highest binding capacity at 6 hours, and that it was actually increased when there was a low pH. So to make sure that that acid was acidic, it greatly increased that PFAS binding ability. So, there's research out there looking at getting rid of these
Mhm.
forever chemicals. So
Mhm.
maybe someday they will no longer carry that foreverness in their names.
No, we'll to Justin's point, we'll figure out a way, right? That's the human way. Oops. Oh mon Dieu. Okay. On that loud clattery note, it is time for us to dance off. Madame, Monsieur, merci beaucoup. It was so delightful to everyone in the audience. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate you so tenderly. And so now to the end of happiness and joy, we dance out. Au revoir, mes amis. Au revoir.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.